The Purge is a series that's been flailing about, surviving on the typical Blumhouse strategy of low budgets on safe bets for years, but differs from the typical Blumhouse picture in being comically high concepts. The breakout hit for Blumhouse was Paranormal Activity, a micro-budget horror movie that consists largely of pots falling off shelves, marketing so well that $200,000 became $20 million for audiences of teenagers who needed a place to make out with mom breaking into their rooms. Since Paranormal Activity, they've largely stayed in similar lanes with franchises like Insidious, Sinister, Ouija, Unfriended, the Facebook Ghost movie, but not the other Facebook Ghost movie because there are multiple, M3GAN, and the Evil Teddy Bear movie. Most of these are PG-13 to maximize their profit with horny teenagers, but they also have a long-running, micro-budget, high-concept, action, horror, home invasion, sci-fi, speculative fiction, political allegory genre fusion franchise that chugs along off a concept people always take the bait on. These movies started as dumb political allegories and have only gotten more brazen, silly, and frankly exploitational, and will very likely have their last hurrah this very year as the Orange Man Bad is running for office one last time. It's safe to say this franchise will peter out for good unless something drastic changes in how these movies are designed, and I'm gonna cash in hard on it. The Purge series is dragged around on a concept so insane and convoluted that I will have to consistently come back in order to point out that the concept is so poorly thought out that every movie in this series has to jump through hoops to even appear sensible. In the near future of 2014,
a magnificent far-off year of 2002.
the economy collapses and the totalitarian new founding fathers of America take over, despite the fact that the country is in no way run as a totalitarian state and still holds fair elections. And in the distant future of 2017, they enact the Purge, an annual 12-hour overnight jamboree where all crime is legal, which successfully gets unemployment down to 1% and revitalizes the economy. There are only a few stipulations. No explosives because they would be too expensive to film, certain government officials like the president cannot be killed, and that's about it. The movies don't really explain how these rules are enforced, although we do see in the show, the television show, how they're enforced. Police and fire departments don't normally operate during the Purge, so people who break the rules have to be hunted down afterwards. And despite all crime being legal, the movies are only interested in portraying people committing murder. Nobody ever takes a plane and crashes it into a building, nobody buys a gun with a bump stock, and perhaps most fascinatingly, nobody commits major theft or financial crime. You could walk into a bank, take $1 million, and nobody could stop you. The economy would be in shambles, complete chaos, but it never occurs to anyone, at least not in the movies. Instead, everyone goes straight for killing, and oh boy, they try hard to justify it, but we'll get to that. The premise is terrible, needlessly high concept for a very silly reason, we'll get to that. And if you can get through one of these movies without a nagging feeling that it's the stupidest thing you've ever seen, you may want to get checked for a concussion. I haven't even started talking about the fucking movies yet. The Purge is a home invasion movie. It's a genre that is primarily bad. There's about 1 million of them, they're all borderline the same, people in house, guys come in with weapons, some of them die, and only 2 good ones have ever been made, You're Next and Home Alone, somehow. The Purge isn't even the bottom of the barrel. I saw The Strangers Chapter 1 of 3 in theaters this year, and it's somehow even worse. You may be thinking to yourself, that's it? They have this insane concept and the best they could make is a home invasion movie? Well, my friend, you're thinking about it backwards. The Purge isn't a movie about the Purge, it's a terrible home invasion movie, and the Purge exists as set dressing to explain why Ethan Hawke can't just call the police. This is typically solved in these kind of movies by putting them somewhere remote, but if you want to put one in a suburban house, you just have to make up an excuse as to why the police are absent, and I guess this was the easiest way. The Purge is the most ridiculously high-concept answer to the question every modern non-paranormal horror movie has to tackle. Why doesn't Ethan Hawke have an iPad? You really need to stew in it. Your Next solved this with a simple signal jammer. The Purge wrote an elaborate alternate future premise about racist neo-Nazis taking over America and instituting a lawless half-day that everyone agrees is only for killing to explain why Ethan Hawke doesn't use a telephone. And also to give us this Dajoka baby tier performance. Let's go back to the start. Writer and director of all of these films except one, James DeMonaco, was inspired by road rage to make this movie. DeMonaco comes into this series carrying years of experience in, Well, and then they made this movie for $3 million. However, the movie almost got Batgirled, with Universal being hesitant to release it due to it being shit, and also because it's a weird political commentary. But according to DeMarco, it tested well with the black and Mexican audiences. I don't know what that means. Because of its deep political message, I remain skeptical. Right, the plot. It's the distant future of 2022, right after COVID, and Ethan Hawke is a dad who really does not want to be in this movie, and who allegedly slept on Jason Blum's couch throughout the entire production, and it's time for the yearly purge. Just him, his daughter's edgy boyfriend who snuck in, his dopey son, and his wife. Ethan Hawke created cutting-edge purge security systems, which his house, and that of all his neighbors, is guarded by, and for reasons I don't really get, all of his rich neighbors take the fact that they purchased his product extremely personally. They're absolutely fuming about it. Do you think all fucking Bill Gates neighbors go to his house and scream at him about having to buy a Windows? Like, damn asshole, I gave you $300 for fucking Windows 11? And then they try to murder him? What else? Okay, so Purge Night comes, the sun lets a homeless guy in, he vanishes like a ghost after they try to throw him out, and climbs around in their vents for a while. The homeless guy was running from Dystopia Baby, young Republican, who's also followed by a gang of people in spooky masks for some reason, and King Fedora keeps asking Ethan Hawke to turn over the homeless guy because rich people are bad, and they hate black people, and they want to kill poor people, and that's the political message. Ethan Hawke wants to throw out the homeless guy to protect his family because rich people are greedy, and the theater kid wants to kill him because he's rich and rich people are bad. Racism and classism have truly been defeated by the Purge. This movie is also allegedly about gun control, word of God from the creator. Frankly, I don't really see how, beyond the Purge being some incredibly vague metaphor for people owning guns. The good guys use legally acquired guns for self-defense constantly in this movie. Ethan Hawke shoots the boyfriend when he tries to JFK him. For some reason, all the masked people in Dystopia Baby get shot constantly. Ted Cruz even Zodiac's one of his own guys, which is like a supervillain thing more than a psycho cult leader thing, but I guess something had to happen in this movie. Ethan Hawke gets shot, but I guess he deserved it. I don't know. I guess he was rich. I don't know. The neighbors come to kill them as revenge for making them buy the thing, and the homeless guy with the heart of gold saves them, and the purge ends uneventfully. That's really all there is to it. It's unabashedly a generic home invasion movie, and even for a generic home invasion movie, it's quite generic. There's an inordinate amount of exposition to explain the ridiculous background concept, a half hour of build-up, a half hour of Ethan Hawke yelling to the debate club through a window, and 20 minutes of people shooting each other mixed in. There's not really a plot, or characters, arcs, intrigues, scares, tension, suspense, or really much of anything. Ethan Hawke doesn't really change. He decides not to give the homeless guy to the cast a Glee, but he was always empathetic to him to some extent, even after the homeless guy tried to kill him, because this movie is pretty poorly thought out. The political messaging is about as tactful and graceful as dysentery. Rich people exploit poor people, rich people exploit each other, rich people are psychopaths who kill homeless people, and also the director says it's about gun control, which has some very mixed messaging to say the least. There's nothing creative going on at all, really. McPatrick Bateman tries to kill people with a bat, and everyone else stands 8 to 15 feet from each other in the house the whole movie takes place in, shooting at each other. The house is just a plain, white-ass house. The security system is just some big metal doors, and creative imagery is limited to what if you looked through the door view hole, and a girl in a spooky mask and girl in spooky mask skips eerily. Even most sitcoms make better uses of camera angles, some tilts and zooms, some interesting framing, anything. I'll take anything that isn't flat mid-range shots of people talking or looking through a door hole. It's utterly stylish, dialogue is cliched exposition dumps, it's charmless, and it's really not helped by the fact that the thing this movie is named after, this ridiculous premise that serves a minor utilitarian purpose in the form of removing phones from the equation, is basically completely irrelevant to what's going on. It really is just a bad home invasion movie that dangles a tantalizingly unhinged premise just out of reach. It is omega bland. Somehow the writer-director seemed to have no passion or talent put into this thing at all, and it's just another for the blowjob horror pile that's a nearly bottomless well. Saying all of that, on a budget of $3 million, despite horrible reviews, the movie made $90 million. About 10% people who thought the premise would be an actual element to the movie, and 90% 15-year-old couples who need 5 minutes. Hence the term blowjob movie. The Purge Anarchy is the closest this series gets to a real movie, and it's fine. It's really okay. There's no production story here. The first one made a ton of money, so they immediately made another, which was out by 2014, but it does feel a bit more ambitious and like a bit more effort was put into it. Anarchy has characters, some of whom have arcs, and follows several intertwined storylines, kind of like a real movie. Frank Grillo is the central focus. He's a cop who watched justice fail. The man who killed his son in a drunk driving accident is gone free, and he's going to use the purge to get revenge, but he gets pulled into being the protector of various other characters and begins to struggle with his quest for vengeance. For what it's worth, he's pretty good in the movie, bringing a believable amount of conflict to the character and carries the movie pretty hard on his back. The Sanchez family are left in a bad position after the patriarch of their family agrees to be killed by purgers for money, and they happen to get raided by purgers, pushing them into the streets, and a married couple on the brink of divorce have their vehicle sabotaged before the purge and get chased down by the spawn campers, which pushes them all into the protection of Frank Grillo. As opposed to being a bland home invasion movie, this movie is an odd road trip through a Los Angeles war zone. It has a ton of pretty mediocre action and one fun scene with a flamethrower car, as well as an array of side characters that come in and out of the story and make Frank Grillo second guess his mission, while the Sanchez family acts as a conscience of sorts, and it all works to a level. There's undeniably a lot more going on than the first movie. Characters talk, the camera moves, even if the movie is still on the cheap and bland side, it's significantly less so, and the premise is actually utilized to some extent, even if everyone is still just killing each other. It's also revealed that not many people actually participate in the purge, and government contractors just go out to kill the homeless. Basically hand-waves the premise entirely in a very clumsy way and kind of undermines it if real people don't tend to participate and just sit at home while the government cleans up the cost sinks of society, I guess, to put it in a kind of blunt way. And you'd kind of think that after 8 years, the 1% homeless population wouldn't really be worth culling anymore. Like the fact that they've gone through 8 purges and there's still homeless people to kill, even though unemployment is at 1%. Where are they getting new homeless people? Where do they come from? The premise does kind of collapse in on itself even more than it already had, and it gets even weirder when the anti-purge resistance is brought in. A group of militants that kills rich people to prove that the purge is bad, led by Michael K. Williams. You are way too good to be in this movie. You'd think that this would be a plotline that explains the world, the anti-purge sentiment of most people, or really goes anywhere. But every character in the movie is already anti-purge, even Frank Grillo, even though he's trying to take advantage of it. And they're basically just a deus ex machina to save the group after they get captured by non-purgers towards the end, and then the movie resumes as normal, jumping straight to Frank Grillo getting to his son's killer's home, forgiving him, and then getting saved by the drunk driver who shoots the militia guy, and it ends within 2 minutes after that. It's not a horrendous movie, it's a basic dystopian action movie. It has character arcs slightly. It has a flamethrower car. It's all the stuff a movie should have, but it's also kind of just middling and generic. The dumb premise is used to the fullest to make a semi-modern day Mad Max in Los Angeles, and optimally it probably would have ended here with all the juice milked from it. A semi-real movie made, one with a surprising lack of focus on the bad allegory angle outside of the rich people abuse poor people thing, but also this movie made $100 million, and a little event happened that you might have heard of called the 2016 election, which turned this mediocre movie into a jumping off point for In 2016, we got The Purge election year, a movie whose tagline is Keep America Great. For a franchise so subtle, well thought out, and nuanced, you may be wondering what allegory this movie could possibly be attempting to communicate. It may forever be a mystery. What deep political subtext could be at play? Frank Grillo returns, surprisingly, and he's still fairly good here, despite his new role, from retired police officer to future Madame President Hillary Clinton's bodyguard. Wait, 2040? Anarchy took place in 2023. Frank Grillo hasn't aged a day. Also, Hillary Clinton was a kid when she watched her parents die in 2022, but she's given an implicit romantic relationship with Grillo. He had a dead 8-year-old in Anarchy. She's the same age as his dead son. Why not just set it in like 2028 or something? It's not like the future setting is utilized for anything but a tracing bullet, and I'm pretty sure we could make those today if we really wanted. They'd just be stupidly unreliable, prone to breaking when shot, and kinda defeat the point of bullets. The Grillo plot is all over the place, primarily being exactly what it looks like. Brave Hilldog Clinton wants to end the purge, but the evil Christian alt-right neo-Nazi Orange Man Bad Trump, who runs a secret purge night church service where they sacrifice poor people to do, I don't know, because purge at the church, because Christian, bad, and Trump. The stakes of the movie are pretty low until the Orange Man legalizes killing anyone on Purge Night, including Hillary Clinton, which starts an escapade across LA, and all of this is fine until the end, to be honest. There's truthfully not a lot to say. There's a lot of shooting and yelling, there's a few genuinely fun moments, but there's a few really dumb moments, like getting snuck up on by a drone covered in gamer lights. Like a sitcom that can't hit 22 minutes though, there's another plot that converges in the middle with this one, following an African-American store owner who defends his store after he loses his purge insurance coverage. The story starts off boring as hell, frankly, but spirals until its merger with the other half. Joe Dixon, the store owner, talks in a way you don't often see in movies. He really likes the N-word. Not so much the main one, or the A one, but the old-fashioned one. And boy does it feel really weird. James DeMonico is not black. There's plenty of people who do talk this way in real life. I've met plenty, especially when I lived in Superior, but given DeMonico is Italian and Michael Bay, who produces these movies, is, you know, Michael Bay, it sure feels weird to see him doing Crip whistles, calling a group of Crips this thing I can't say, and saying this thing I can't say. It's very weird. I mean, it makes me laugh. It's funny, but also it feels really weird. It's kind of the ending that tanks this movie. A group of anti-purgers want to kill Orange Man, but Hillary Clinton is too honorable and kind and compassionate for that, if you say so. However, she's kidnapped, so the anti-purgers and Grillo bust into the church, and between speeches about how if they kill the president, they'll be just as bad as him, they gun down an entire church full of people attending the service in an organized mass shooting while quipping about how funny it is that they did. That's not how guns work. Did they invent no recoil guns in the future? That's not how guns work. Yeah, they just gun down a bunch of people in a church, and I know that they're bad people because they're like part of the Purge Christianity thing, but also it's kind of weird. The tone, as with the gun message in the first film, might be a little bit all over the place and hypocritical. I mean, especially if you take the gun thing in the first movie seriously and then watch Frank Grillo and the rest of our protagonists gun down a bunch of unarmed people, it feels very weird. Like, yeah, they spare the Orange Man, but they did this too. It's profoundly dumb, even more so that it's so preachy about it, constantly this and thatting about the morality of the purge, and I'm just here thinking about all the insider trading I would be doing. We watch our heroes gun down unarmed civilians in a church, then refuse to kill Alec Baldwin, and it's also Hillary can win, outlaw the purge, and despite all that, it's immediately undercut as the purge enjoyers immediately begin purging the peace and quiet fans immediately as set up for the fifth movie, although we'll get back to that. Not to be that guy, but what's the point of any of this? I get the allegories about like rich people and Christians and Orange Man are bad and you should vote Hillary Clinton, but why is this stupid home invasion movie franchise turned into this bizarre hypocritical mess? We had a tolerable thing going on with the second movie, being a less apocalyptic Mad Max, but now we're in 2040, a setting chosen exclusively to facilitate GPS bullets and nothing else. We're trying really hard to exploit relevant politics for what is a goofy White House down-style thriller, and our heroes murder more unarmed people than our villains, which probably is maybe a bad message to paste on top of your right side of history message. It's not just confused as the first movie could be, it feels almost willfully all over the place and incongruent to the point that it makes the whole thing kind of baffling and hard to follow. It's a mess, so perhaps going back will help set the sails. The First Purge is a remake of Anarchy. It's kind of incredible given that this movie came out in 2018, 4 years after Anarchy. The First Purge tells the story of the First Purge in 2014, but because civilians are uninterested in participation, the government needs to pay them to stick around for the tests. Nothing proceeds to happen for quite a while because nobody wants to participate. Then the government gets bored too and hires the police and the Ku Klux Klan to run around attempting to kill the almost entirely black cast. Two things to note. One, this is nearly beat for beat Anarchy again. They hire guys to kill the good guys because no one wants to participate. And two, subtlety was not an element considered in the slightest. There's an incredibly obvious theme here. The government is run by idiots who make people below them fight over table scraps, giving them $5,000 to stay for the purge. And also, 2016 was the early era of Black Lives Matter and renewed interest in police brutality and stuff. So the police and KKK team up against a bunch of poor black people is kind of beating you over the head. It's not very subtle. That said, I mean, at least it's consistent theming and doesn't constantly undermine itself. The original Purge movie was confused and inconsistent gun control thing wrapped in a bad home invasion movie, so telling a very obvious and straightforward story is honestly kinda refreshing, even if I audibly groaned when Kendrick Lamar's Alright began rolling over the credits sequence as everyone walked away from the Purge. There's a straightforward and consistent idea that makes it probably the most coherent movie in the series. Hell, as it goes, this one is kind of a little more playful and takes itself less seriously than the others. The cast is way more playful with each other, with sillier interactions that breathe some slight life into this movie, at least over the typical melodrama that was present in the first three. It's not to say it's particularly well acted or above the typical Blumhouse drivel, but there is a little spark to watch the characters interact and joke about their lives and have actual relationships beyond being people who shoot guys with each other. I couldn't name any of the characters. They're fairly flat, but as far as it goes, some of their banter and stuff was fun, which puts it on a slightly more tolerable scale than the other movies. Perhaps the biggest issue the movie has is that it's basically a more boring version of Anarchy. Better in some ways, worse in others. The action definitely doesn't hit the high watermark of Anarchy's passable low-budget action, where there you at least had a Mad Max flamethrower car, some passable shootouts, a helicopter. Here you got a whole lot of nothing in the first half because the movie acknowledges the concept of the Purge being stupid. Most people don't want to kill anyone, and the only thing of worth to do is steal money. Our characters have no incentive to do anything or leave their houses or go anywhere. There's not many villains doing anything, and when we finally do get our villains, they're just faceless hired goons. A lot of this movie is Aunt May and some guy in a suit talking about how little is happening and debating how to get the Purge started so that they don't lose their funding. And that's not very interesting. You need things to happen. You can't just have characters lampshade the fact that nothing is happening to kill time until the Ku Klux Klan shows up. When things do finally start to happen, it's mostly just generic shootouts in apartment buildings. There's a lot of cartoonishly menacing shots of police officers and KKK members back and forth to beat you over the head with the message. Then bang 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 shootout. There's just nothing to grip onto here. For the much better effort at making the characters at least sort of endearing, they completely forgot to make any sort of satisfying payoff or anything interesting at all, really. There's themes that play in the background throughout, yeah. There's some fun interactions, but it's just this, shooting guys in a hallway. It's not interesting or fun, it's kinda just trying too hard to get across a message in a way that only makes it fall flat. And also, the song, man, it kills me. Placing the First Purge is kinda tough. It's a wholly mediocre movie, and it's even less exciting than the movie it essentially acts as a remake of, but it also feels way more competent in a lot of areas, especially when it comes to the characters. It tries to have endearing characters, it has a decently novel concept, and it has a functional if ham-fisted message, and it may be the best movie in the series for it, although Anarchy is a little more fun. And even then, being the best movie in this franchise is a low bar for sure, but not one that it doesn't work to try to top. The Purge has been a stunningly unsurprising series. What you see is basically what you get. They're ham-fisted, straightforward movies. All the more surprising then that this franchise has a hell of a twist. USA Network's The Purge the series is actually pretty decent. Much better than the movies anyway. I was dreading the show and put it off for way too long. Oh boy, the movies, but on even worse budgets, longer, and on the fucking Psych and Burn Notice network. But then I watched it, and while it ain't The Sopranos or The Wire, it's actually enjoyable. The goofy and deeply flawed premise of The Purge and all the issues that the premise has are still there, but very different angles are examined rather than really bad home invasion movie, mediocre action movie with Donald Trump, and mediocre action movie remake, but with more politics. And perhaps the sensibilities of TV budgeting prevent it from being action nonsense. Season 1 of The Purge is essentially a contained anthology series, swapping perspective periodically, exploring different aspects of life in this world, and coming together pretty badly in the end. One perspective focuses on a manager at a corporate office who orders a purge night hit on her boss after feeling she was passed over repeatedly for her race and sex, but quickly comes to regret it. One follows a well-off couple with a complicated marital situation as they attend a purge party as part of a business transaction and are forced to participate. Another is about a young girl lured into a purge cult where its members willingly volunteer to be purged, and the last follows her brother as he attempts to look for her across the city and meets a variety of characters, mostly sketchy ones, from a cop who runs a safe haven bar to a human trafficker involved in collecting people to be purged. Plus, towards the end of the series, we see the introduction of a purge vigilante who runs around all night rescuing people for his own reasons. There's a lot of variety here, certainly more than the typical mediocre urban Mad Max we usually see, and the lower key nature of the series and length means that the characters need to have arcs, and characters, and personality, and drama of varying quality. The couple's storyline is fairly soap opera. They had a threesome with the daughter of the guy they're trying to do business with, and the wife and the other girl end up in a semi-romantic relationship. The husband feels insecure, there's baby drama, their neighbor wants them dead for cutting down his tree. It's all pretty cheesy, but at least gives you something to be invested in. The business one was my favorite part for a good while, but kinda peters out. The idea that she immediately regrets what she tried to do and rushes to prevent it is a really fun idea that could have led to some really fun drama and soul-searching and a reflection on the dangers of getting sucked into something like The Purge. But it turns out that her boss is actually evil and kidnaps women for his Epstein purge parties to grope them, which kinda pivots in a less interesting direction. I think the plot lines with the siblings are fairly well done and have nice moments as the pair eventually reunite and get some revenge on the sister's abusive ex-boyfriend, as well as exploring some other aspects of the Purge that we've never really seen before, like people who get weirdly into it and cults, and it's revealed that the cult is run by the NFFA as a way of basically tricking undesirables into getting rid of themselves. The big fault really comes in the finale as we're introduced to the Purge vigilante, who kidnaps all of our protagonists pretty much without resistance. It's extraordinarily contrived that the whole cast is pulled into this, especially given their prior grand adventures, as opposed to just sitting at home bored. You know, you'd figure that at least someone that he picked up wasn't in the middle of the Purge and going on a giant 10-episode Purge adventure, but let's roll with it and see what happens. The idea of a man holding purge trials for people who wronged him is actually genuinely pretty fun, but I think beyond the contrived setup, the whole thing kinda falls flat by making him a petty lunatic. And it is intentional, I get that. But having him kidnap the cult girl because she didn't thank him for holding the door open, or the manager woman because of a bad date where he made a ton of racist and sexist jokes, makes him seem like a joke and undermines the drama of the situation. A lot of media lives and dies by good villains, a villain you can empathize with and understand even if not agreeing with them. Holding a trial for a guy who screwed you out of money or for the woman who laid you off is extreme, yeah, but it feels like a reasonable reaction as opposed to a cartoonishly over-the-top way to tie the whole series together. And I get that they didn't want people relating to him because he's the bad guy, but making him this cartoonishly, like, ridiculous and evil, just... it doesn't work. If he was, like, a realistically angry person, it would have a lot more tension and weight to it over this. If it had been executed well, even despite the contrived setup, it really could have tied the series together in a fun way. But as it stands, it does feel like a crawl to some kind of ending. And it's one that I don't think was even really needed. I don't think you had to tie all these different stories together. I think they all could have just had their own endings. And none of these characters had to meet each other or team up against the crazy Joker guy. You could have just ended it, honestly. The Purge isn't a great show, but it lays a good foundation for the series' second season. An interesting new angle on the franchise, lower stakes stories that explore a lot of new directions and different stories and variety, crimes not involving murder, actual characters to latch onto. It almost feels like the whole franchise should have been on television, where it can spread its wings as a hokey network drama with a stupid gimmick. I came out of it pleasantly surprised, and I'm frankly pretty excited to see if they can manage to bring it together better in the second season with the format a bit ironed out. The Purge Season 2 is good. No caveats, it's legitimately good, and turns the terrible premise of The Purge completely on its head, creating fascinating and fun ideas out of a pile of shit. There's so much to like, it's hard to know where to start, but one of my favorite things is the mostly unrelated skits that begin each episode, with jokes about the premise. A Purge mask company introduces a gay pride mask for going out on murder sprees, a holiday between purges called Remembrance Day, where families of people who died in the Purge get a shitty box from the government with a picture of their dead family member. They're actually jokes, just tiny little bits of satire mixed in, and they're actually funny and amusing. They're like the RoboCop advertisements. It's also far from the only positive attribute. Like the last season, this is an anthology of stories and switching perspectives. However, a majority of the series takes place between purges. Episode 1 is the final few hours of the prior purge, and the final few episodes are the big payoff. But a lot of it deals with the day-to-day consequences and fallout of life between the purges. An ER doctor survives an attempt on his life and finds out that there's a price on his head for the next purge, and desperately works to find out who wants him dead. A woman working purge surveillance for the NFFA watches a friend die and stumbles into a surveillance thriller, as her attempts to find out why the NFA had her friend and others killed during and even illegally after the purge get them to turn their surveillance on her. A group of bank robbers who exclusively perform their heists during the purge plan out their next job after one of their guys gets busted, being an inch inside the bank as the siren sounded, and a college student survives an attack on the purge and gets a taste for blood after killing his attacker, leading him to begin killing off-purge, leaving those around him and the government baffled. All of these are fun on their own, but even better together as they offer a ton of variety. A thriller about a man discovering his neighbors hate him, a surveillance thriller, a heist, and a fairly straightforward slasher. And more so, the format of television means that we get to spend a ton of time with these characters, watch them grow, and get attached to them. The serial killer begins as a pretty regular guy who gets abandoned by his friend and tries to resist his urge to kill initially, eventually devolving into a full-blown slasher villain, but when it actually gets back to the purge, he realizes he's a small fish in a big pond after preying exclusively on unarmed and unsuspecting victims, and the doctor picking him up after he's been beaten at the end of the penultimate episode actually got me excited to see what was gonna happen. The Doctor himself has a lot of great moments too, specifically in his refusal to hurt anyone, even as as his neighbors come to kill them. He works to foster peace with the people he unwittingly hurt, which is a wonderful change of pace, and while the heist never pans out to be as cool as it sounded like it might be, it becomes deeply entwined with the surveillance plot, with the heisters helping release proof of the NFFA's illegal killing of a researcher who proved that the purge increases violent behavior in people instead of reducing it, which is heavily implied to spark the anti-purge movement that plays out in Anarchy and election year. The series ends with teases towards this future as the characters in the show begin to rally around a growing anti-purge movement, but with our little serial killer making moves of his own as he survives after the doctor refuses to kill him. Perhaps a planned storyline where he creates his own group to clash with the others, which sadly will never come to be. There's constantly unraveling mysteries, new twists, changing situations. When I found out the doctor's wife was having sketchy late night visits with a mystery person, I figured it was an affair and that the other guy was buying the hits. But then there's a further mystery as he discovers it's not just the one guy who had the hit outs. When the heist gets hijacked by a corrupt police officer who wants in on the action, the heisters switch up the plan on her. It's constantly throwing new stuff at you, new ideas is what I'm saying. It also ends a lot stronger than Season 1 managed, not feeling the need to twist all of the stories together. The heist and surveillance storylines are a natural pair as opposite ends of the law, and tie together seamlessly pretty early on, while the way the serial killer and doctor plotlines converge at the end, while kind of contrived, is just plain fun. A guy who can't kill anyone and just wants to foster peace crashing into a guy who literally cannot stop killing. And this is following a fun main climax for both in a pretty standard college slasher movie, and a standoff between two parties with pretty much everything to lose. All the problems of this franchise, its premise, kind of melt away as they find fun and interesting stories that take advantage of the stupid premise, and setting a majority of it between purges forces it to be something other than people in city streets shooting each other. It's willing to milk drama out of every aspect to the point that you don't really care if the premise is dumb, and it even has some room to laugh about itself in the opening vignettes. Hell, we finally got the financial crime I've been begging for since the start of this video. The Purge Season 2 is a lot of fun, and unlike literally everything else in this video, I think it's absolutely something worth seeking out for doing what I assumed was impossible. Turning the stupid premise of this franchise into something fascinating, exploring the unique social and ethical dynamics of the setting, and I really could not be more impressed. And despite that, the series died pretty unceremoniously, presumably for boring ratings reasons. The interesting stuff set up in the end never came to pass, and instead we got the Forever Purge. It's bad, it's flagrant about its ham-fistedness in a way even election year isn't. The Forever Purge takes place on the Mexican border. The first line in the Forever Purge talks about how the NFFA regained control of the country off-screen and reinstituted the purge, and so nothing came of what happened at the end of the third movie. And from there, the Forever Purge takes place on the Mexican border, and after a routine night of purging, the purge continues. A cult of alt-right conspiracy theorists have begun the Forever Purge to kill all Mexican people because they're racist, and everyone needs to flee to Mexico to escape the violence. The movie doesn't even lampshade the ridiculous scenario, if I'm being honest. A Mexican character in this movie who admits that there's a lot of places in Mexico that are already like an endless purge, that's a line you probably should have cut out if you wanted people to take your weird political allegory seriously. It's just the very silly message about border control that needs to be there for this movie to have its premise. The fact that Mexico and Canada only open their borders for 6 hours is crazy. I guess if you live in the central or eastern United States, you're just fucked, you're dead. Florida, bye. Georgia, bye. Kansas, bye. The first hour or so lays it on thick, people being racist against Mexicans except the mostly kindly ranch owners, who are our main characters. The Forever Purgers all wear Confederate flags and talk about how the Mexicans need to go back over the border, and the plot boils down to the Mexicans smuggling the white people over the border to Mexico. There's even an anchor baby born in Mexico. This shit, man. This fucking shit. What clever commentary. It borders on unbelievable how flagrant it is. It's about as blatant as you can imagine, just crawling down the list of every current year topic to either bait rage views or agreement pity claps. And in the end, the movie functionally boils down to another movie where dudes wander around dark city streets shooting each other. However, this time, it's probably the worst shot one. The entire movie takes place in Alien vs. Predator Requiem tier indiscernible darkness, and you can't see anything. There's a bad CGI tank, and there's a lot of shooting, and it'll cut to news footage of like a Native American guy saying this is like revenge for the Native Americans. Then the Mexicans will be like, you need to go over the border like we used to go over the border to find a better life. None of the characters matter. They just talk about the border the whole time. That's all that happens. And there's like a woman who has a baby and she loves her husband, and the ranch owner's nice to Mexicans, so he gets killed by the purgers, and then they go to Mexico. After the cornball first hour, it's just kind of another mediocre action movie. I don't know what to say. It's miserable and dull and preachy. I really don't even have any funny observations or commentary about it like I did the others. I don't have anything nice to say about it. Even for this series, it's intolerably preachy and ham-fisted, and it feels even worse knowing that we came out of a show that cracked the code and turned the Purge into a series of interesting ideas, and then we immediately went back to pathetic current year political baiting for engagement bait and guns in dark Toronto streets. I assume Toronto because it's the cheapest place to film. I don't know what to say. I genuinely have nothing to say. It's not even funny. It's kind of pathetic that this flagrant political cash-in, put every buzzword in the trailer, Mexico border, Orange Man, kill Mexicans, that something this just flagrant could come into existence off such a flimsy and shitty idea. And that's it. As of now, this is where the series ends. Whimper. The Forever Purge was intended to be the end, and probably will be chronologically, as it ends with America being destroyed by the Purgers. However, the Purge 6 is in some early state of production, and will allegedly be a continuation of the Frank Grillo stuff for some reason, which I guess is like probably the most interesting place to fill in the gap, since there was like a civil war in there somewhere, but my expectations are pretty low. The Purge deserves its whimpering end. The series largely comprises of terrible low-budget slop, made for nothing but making money off of being horror movies that market well by capitalizing on real political stuff in a kind of grimy way, that they just use the current political thing as free marketing and try to like bait people into seeing these mediocre as fuck action movies. There's basically no artistry in this series' form of addressing political topics. There's plenty of movies that address political topics and ideas in ways that are clever and interesting, and this franchise ain't that. The characters talk about the current hot news for 30 minutes to an hour, then shoot each other in the cheapest block you can rent in Toronto, or like maybe a really shitty home invasion movie once. There's nothing here but an extremely basic series of micro-budget action movies that sell themselves on being controversial with no real substance. The show was a surprising breath of fresh air, especially season 2, where someone was able to take the abjectly terrible premise and make fun and varied ideas out of it. But as it stands, the movies seem to have no interest in attempting anything of the sort, and the next one to come out will probably be no different and just capitalize on whatever the current political thing is. And I imagine that if Donald Trump wins, we'll probably get like 4 more of these, like 1 a year, that are about Orange Man, but I can dream that doesn't come to be. I guess in a way I'm a hypocrite because I capitalized on the election that's upcoming to capitalize on the Purge, which is capitalizing on the prior election. So maybe that makes me a hypocrite, but I guess at least I can die happy knowing I wasn't the guy who wrote the Forever Purge.